How do you destroy an empire? Not with foreign invaders, not with economic collapse, with a family argument. Charlemagne, the father of Europe, built a vast empire. It stretched from the North Sea to the Mediterranean. He united a continent with his vision and his sword. He revived the idea of a universal Christian empire, not seen since Rome. His reign was the high watermark of an age, a symbol of unity and purpose. Just one generation later, his own grandsons met on a battlefield. They were not allies, but bitter enemies. They unleashed a devastating war, a slaughter so immense it shattered their empire. It extinguished the very idea of a united Europe for centuries. This is the story of how a family feud between three brothers ended a dynasty, how it destroyed an army and drew the first bloody borders of modern Europe. This is the story of the Battle of Fontenoy. The Carolingian world began to unravel with Charlemagne's only surviving son, Louis the Pious. Charlemagne was a warrior. Louis was a man of deep, introspective faith. When he took the throne in 814, he faced a problem his father had avoided by chance: succession. The problem was Frankish tradition. It dictated that a father's inheritance be divided equally among his sons. This custom was for personal property, not imperial governance. How do you divide an indivisible empire? In 817, Louis tried to solve this with the Ordinatio Imperii, the ordering of the empire. It was a brilliant, if flawed, compromise. His eldest son, Lothair, would become co-emperor and the principal heir. His two younger sons, Pepin and Louis the German, would receive sub-kingdoms but remain under Lothair's authority. In theory, this plan preserved unity. But this delicate balance was shattered. A fourth son arrived. After his first wife died, Louis remarried. In 823, his new wife, Judith of Bavaria, gave birth to Charles, later known as Charles the Bald. His ambitious mother lobbied relentlessly for her sons' inheritance. In 829, Louis gave in. He redrew the map and carved out a kingdom for Charles from lands promised to his older brothers. This act ignited a firestorm of chaos. For the next decade, the empire was racked by civil war. The three elder sons felt betrayed and repeatedly revolted against their father. Sons fought father, brothers fought brothers. Twice, Louis was deposed by his own children, only to be reinstated when they turned on each other. The 830s were a dress rehearsal for the disaster to come. This conflict bled the empire of resources, undermined the emperor's authority, and deepened the hatred between the brothers. By the time Louis the Pious died in 840, the dream of a unified empire was dying with him. Upon his father's death, Lothair moved swiftly. He ignored the compromises of his father's final years. He sent a clear message. He was the emperor, and he would claim the entire empire, just as the original 817 decree had promised. From his capital at Aachen, he saw himself as the sole heir to Charlemagne. He was ready to enforce that claim with the sword. His brothers had other plans. In the east, Louis the German had built his own power base and had no intention of submitting. In the west, the youngest brother, Charles the Bald, was just a teenager, but he was ambitious and determined to keep the kingdom his father had granted him. An alliance between them was inevitable. The civil war that had simmered for a decade now exploded. Charles the Bald and Louis the German joined forces to resist Lothaire's perceived tyranny. Lothaire, in turn, secured the support of his nephew, Pepin II, who was fighting Charles for control of a kingdom. The battle lines were drawn. On one side were the imperialists, led by Lothaire, fighting to keep the empire whole. On the other were the divisionists, Charles and Louis, fighting for their own independent kingdoms. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation. The brothers and their vast armies converged on a small village in Burgundy that would soon become infamous, Fontenoy. In June of 841, the armies finally met. The combined forces of Louis the German and Charles the Bald confronted Lothaire's army. These were not small raiding parties. They were massive levies. The entire military might of the Carolingian world turned against itself. Some chroniclers suggest 150,000 men gathered on each side. While likely an exaggeration, this shows the immense scale of the mobilization. It was a gathering of the entire Frankish aristocracy. For 2 days, tense negotiations took place. Louis and Charles offered a final compromise. They would recognize Lothaire's imperial title, but they demanded their own independent kingdoms. Lothaire, confident in his army, refused. He wanted total submission, not a partnership. At the time, this was seen as more than a political dispute. The coming battle was a judicial day, a judgment of God. Victory would be divine proof of a righteous cause. With diplomacy exhausted, both sides prepared for a cataclysmic battle. On the dawn of June 25, 841, the armies moved into position. The historian Nithard, a grandson of Charlemagne and a cousin to the three kings, was there. He later wrote an eyewitness account, his words heavy with sorrow. Every man on that field, from the lowest foot soldier to the kings, was a Frank. They shared a language, a faith, and a loyalty to Charlemagne's legacy. Now, they were about to engage in a slaughter that would mock that shared heritage. The battle began at dawn. Louis the German's forces crashed against the imperial center, commanded by Lothaire himself. Charles the Bald's troops engaged the army wing led by Pepin II. The fighting was brutal and immediate. For hours, the battle raged in a bloody stalemate under the morning sun. The turning point came around noon. A powerful contingent of Burgundian troops, fighting for Charles the Bald, launched a ferocious attack. The imperial line buckled, then broke. Chaos erupted as the flank collapsed. This was the moment the slaughter truly began. What followed was not a strategic retreat, but a rout, as Lothaire's army disintegrated. The forces of Charles and Louis surged forward. They cut down the fleeing soldiers without mercy. The carnage stunned. Contemporary observers, Nithard, who witnessed it, wrote, "The booty and slaughter were immense and truly astonishing. The annals of Fulda called it the greatest bloodbath the Franks had ever experienced." Some sources claimed as many as 40,000 casualties on Lothaire's side. While the exact numbers are lost, the accounts all agree. The elite of the Frankish nobility was annihilated on that field. The very men needed to govern the empire now lay dead, killed by their own countrymen. Lothaire, his army destroyed, suffered a shameful defeat and fled to his capital. Back at Fontenoy, there was no celebration. The victors spent the next day burying thousands of the dead. The judgment of God had been rendered. The verdict was the destruction of an entire generation of Frankish leaders. The defeat at Fontenoy crippled Lothair, but it didn't end the war. His brothers, Louis and Charles, knew their alliance was the key to final victory. To solidify their pact, they met on February 14, 842, in the city of Strasbourg. What happened there was an event of profound significance. The two brothers swore a binding oath of mutual allegiance in front of their assembled armies. The most remarkable part was not the oath, but the languages used. They knew the common soldiers could not understand courtly Latin, so they chose to speak in the vernacular, so that Charles's soldiers could understand. Louis the German, king of the East Franks, swore his oath in the Romance language, an early form of French. Then, so that Louis's soldiers could understand, Charles the Bold, king of the West Franks, recited the same oath in the Germanic language, an early form of German. This was a watershed moment. The Oaths of Strasbourg are the first surviving texts in what would become French and German. They were a stark acknowledgement that the unified Carolingian world was already splitting. The armies of East and West Francia could no longer easily understand each other. By using these vulgar tongues instead of imperial Latin, Charles and Louis were recognizing a new reality. They were no longer just Frankish princes of one empire. They were rulers of distinct peoples. Lothair finally recognized his cause was hopeless. The war was over. In August 843, the brothers met in the city of Verdun. They signed the treaty that was the political obituary for the unified Carolingian Empire. The empire was officially partitioned into 3 independent kingdoms. Charles the Bold received West Francia. This territory encompassed most of modern-day France and would evolve into the Kingdom of France. Louis the German received East Francia, the lands east of the Rhine River. This was the Germanic-speaking heartland, the foundation of modern Germany. Lothair I, the eldest, kept the title of emperor, but it held little real power. His kingdom, Middle Francia, was a long, unstable corridor of land stretching from the North Sea down into Italy. Lacking any geographical or cultural cohesion, this kingdom was inherently unstable. It would become a contested middle ground between France and Germany for centuries. The Treaty of Verdun was a pragmatic solution to a family feud, but its consequences were revolutionary. It institutionalized the fragmentation of Charlemagne's empire. The dream of a single Christian state in the West was replaced by a landscape of competing kingdoms. The divisions confirmed at Verdun would prove remarkably durable. They laid the essential groundwork for the national boundaries of Europe for the next 1,000 years. The brothers had set out to claim their inheritance. In the process, they had created a new world. The legacy of these feuding brothers is the Europe we know today. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that shaped our world. And let us know in the comments, was a unified empire ever truly possible? Or was the creation of France and Germany inevitable? The Battle of Fontenoy was more than a battle. It was a fratricidal catastrophe. It bled the Carolingian Empire of its strength. The war between Charlemagne's grandsons was born of ambition, but its outcome reshaped a continent. It shattered the political unity that had defined Western Europe. replacing it with a fractured collection of kingdoms. The immense slaughter at Fontenoy broke the back of the imperial military. The Frankish nobility was annihilated, ensuring no single ruler could ever hold the vast realm together again. The Treaty of Verdun was merely the formal recognition of this new reality. The battle where brothers destroyed an empire did not just mark an end. It marked a beginning. In the ashes of Charlemagne's dream, the foundations of France, Germany, and a perpetually divided Europe were laid.